selfless decision to exit the race. Harris assailed Republican Donald Trump in her first rally since launching her bid for the White House, characterizing their contest as a choice between two starkly divergent agendas for the U.S. economy. A new Reuters Ipsos poll shows Vice President Harris leading Trump 44 to 42% in the race for the White House. That difference is within the 3% margin of error, indicating a very tight race. Now, former President Trump has filed a new legal challenge against that $454 million civil fraud judgment against him, the one in New York. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager has details from Washington.
Trump's lawyers filed a brief last night with a Manhattan appeals court saying there were no victims in the case and that the verdict gave New York Attorney General Letitia James limitless power to go after political foes. Justice Arthur Engoron issued the judgment in February after finding Trump and his sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, inflated the values of several properties to win better loan terms. The brief calls Trump one of the most visionary and iconic real estate developers in American history and says banks and lenders vied eagerly for his business. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
And former President Trump has pledged to take part in at least one presidential debate with presumptive nominee Harris. On a campaign call with reporters, Trump said he would be willing to do more than one. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
Wall Street prepares for the latest read on inflation. Supercore PCE, what Powell cares about. What do the numbers mean for next week's Fed meeting?
The Fed has made a big move pushing inflation down.
Instant reaction on Bloomberg surveillance. The market moves. Here's just explore inflation in focus.
Friday morning at 8:30.
A slower inflationary environment is what we're seeing here.
Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app.
And always on Bloomberg 1130.
Context changes everything.
This is the Bloomberg Black Business Beat.
There are seeds of misdirection, little tiny seeds of, girls don't really do math, or CEOs that are black, they don't exist, or a black person can't be a hedge fund manager. These seeds are planted in our little minds and our psyches from the time we were 8 years old, 9 years old, or whatever.
That's Daphne Jones. She's enjoyed a successful career in leadership roles at major companies like GE and IBM, defying odds as a woman and person of color. Now, she wants to share her success. One piece of advice, always look at the big picture.
Play the long game. Do not look at what you're doing or what people are saying in the short-term perspective. Know that there's 4 quarters to a football game.
Jones' latest book, Win When They Say You Won't, is full of advice like that for young women and minorities aiming to break through. I'm Bloomberg's Justin Milliner on the Black Business Beat. Life can be full of risks. One thing you shouldn't take a risk with ever is your family's health insurance. If you're self-employed or you now need affordable health insurance, you need to make this free call right now and see how the Health Insurance Helpline can help you get it. We specialize in helping the self-employed and people just like you who need affordable health insurance to get it. We have short and long-term health insurance plans, and some even cover dental, vision, and prescription drugs. Don't take a risk with your family's health insurance. It's not worth it. If you're self-employed or now need affordable health insurance, call right now and learn for free how to get it. Listen, affordable health insurance plans for everyone just like you are a free phone call away. So give us a shout right now.
800-659-7540. 800-659-7540. 800-659-7540. That's 800-659-7540.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go. Shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit NoTimeToWait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, we talk with Seth Harris at the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University, former top labor policy advisor to President Biden, about his former boss's decision to drop out of the race.
The defining character trait of Joe Biden, at least in his public life, has been resilience. He has suffered unfathomable personal losses. He has suffered professional setbacks that would have caused a lot of other people to go and lie in the fetal position on their beds. But he has always persevered, he has always continued, and he's always gone to work for the people he grew up with in Claymont, Delaware, and in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the middle-class, working-class families that he cares about so much, that he identifies with, and his family was that kind of a family. But there's an even more important trait about Joe Biden, and that is patriotism. He sees Donald Trump, I think correctly, and the Republican Party as an existential threat to democracy in the United States. And when he sat down with his top aides, Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donilon, they showed him the data that showed that it was going to be very difficult for him to stop Donald Trump. He chose country over party, country over self, which, as you all know from doing this television show here in Washington, D.C., when you talk to a lot of politicians, that's not what politicians usually do. He chose to do the right thing for the country and for the working people of this country at great cost to himself. And I don't think it was that the pressure, I don't think it was the donors saying, we're not going to give you any money. It was that he cares about winning for working people. He cares about winning for democracy.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Listen on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We are keeping an eye on shares of Tesla after hours. For right now, we have got Tesla shares trading lower. It did miss Wall Street profit estimates in the second quarter, extending a worse than normal start to the year, marked by slower sales and mass firings across the company. After hours, we got Tesla down now by about 2.6%. Google parent Alphabet reported second quarter revenue that beat analyst expectations, boosted by demand for cloud computing services and advertising on its search engine. After hours, shares of Alphabet, parent of Google, up now by 2.6%. Turned out to be a down day today for the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ Composite Index. S&P slumped 8, a drop today of 0.2%. The Dow was lower by 57 points, down 0.1%. NASDAQ lower by 10 points, a drop today of 0.1%. 10-year yield, 4.25% with a 2-year, 4.49%. Spot gold today up $10 the ounce, up 0.4%. And West Texas Intermediate crude lower today by 1.2%. Well, as for the overall market backdrop, Jimmy Lee is the CEO of Wealth Consulting Group, and he was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I think investors really need to be cautious at this point. So if you've been invested, or even if you're out of the market and you're trying to get back in, I don't think it's a smart idea to try to chase these returns that are the ones that have gone up the most. Still being diversified and maybe a little bit more boring if you're going to participate in equities is the way to go.
Jimmy Lee of Wealth Consulting Group. Again, after hours, Tesla shares tumbling now by just over 3%. Also higher after hours now. We do have Alphabet up by about 1.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Third time is the charm. Like,
I was just telling them that I fell asleep for about 4 hours last night, and then the dog woke me up at about, I think it was 2:33 in the morning, and then I let her out, and then I was awake for like another hour and a half, and so I am...
Scout has no respect.
Scout, all day.
Sleep schedule.
She's old. She's like 13 years old. You gotta respect her. We're talking with David Bach. He's president of IMD, a global executive education platform, still with us at our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. David, how much does curriculum change for you guys from year to year?
So we never teach the same thing twice. It does change quite a bit. We're emphasizing a lot, of course, right now, the impact that AI is going to have on the business. We're thinking about AI both as a pedagogical tool, so how do we use it to personalize learning, but of course also what does it mean for business? What does it mean for service delivery? Where do you go in terms of innovation? So there's always some change. I think that's the most recent area where we're reworking it, but of course, a couple of things remain there. There's some foundational skills that sort of adapt only in terms of the way we deliver them.
I'm wondering how much of your time is spent in the classroom, or when you become president, how much of your time in the classroom versus out there raising money for the school. In the U.S., you went to Berkeley and Yale, so you understand how things work here in the U.S. The deans spend so much time raising money. Are you going to do that?
Yes. So I expect that I'll be spending the majority of my time externally oriented, right? That includes meeting with folks like you and sharing a little bit about what we do, but of course also meeting with our clients, meeting with alums, meeting with donors. I think for us, the client piece is probably a little bit more important than the U.S. schools.
Client.
Right?
The term client is not one you'd hear.
No, you don't hear it from traditional businesses. Yeah. So we work with, we are an academic institution, but we have borrowed, with pride from professional service firms and how they work with their clients to solve their problems. So I'll do a lot of that. I still will teach a little. So I'll probably do about 15, 20 sessions a year. A session for us is about 3-4 hours. So it's not it's not a huge amount compared to my colleagues, but it is important to remain in touch.
Do you see yourself remaining in that position for a while and then going back to teaching? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's usually how it works, right? It's sort of a temporary assignment. Yeah. It's a 5-year term. You might do 1 or 2, depending on how things go, what my colleagues think of my leadership and the board. And then, you usually transition back into a faculty role.
How competitive is this landscape? And, I go back to my undergrad did it here as part of the Columbia University program, and they had a big executive education program, and the execs would go up, I think, like on Fridays, and it was a big deal. How competitive is this space still?
It's super competitive, and really what clients are looking for is clearly the return on investment, right? So one part is, of course, the cost, right, of doing a program like this. But for a company in particular, that like having 30 or 40 people be away from the office for a week, right, is an enormous investment. And so we always do them to make sure we deliver the kind of impact on their business. And so we've been working very hard over the last couple of years to come up with metrics for measuring the impact. The return on learning is really, really good for companies, but we have to demonstrate that, and we compete with others.
Is that the typical program that the people who the clients or the students, that it's a week that they're away? And that's it?
I mean, that's what we have been trying to do. So it used to be longer than that. The time has gotten shorter. We're using technology to drive more impact. So very often before we meet on campus for a week, we might have connected virtually before. We've done some assessments, right? There might be some project work, some coaching after the program. So we extend the learning journey beyond the week, so we have more impact. But a week out at the office is quite typical.
Is there like a certain executive or company that often comes up in conversations?
As a competitor or as a client?
No, as the students that are in there.
Oh, a case
like
study.
Case study or something. Like, I'm curious. People want to.
No, people do want to hear from whoever is sort of new. And so, of course, you talk a lot right now about OpenAI if you're thinking about governance and what happens around technology. And of course, some of the companies you guys feature a lot, Tesla is going to come up, or, BYD and what we can learn from them in terms of their innovation. I've been doing some teaching around TSMC and how do we think about geopolitics through that lens. But then also part of our job is to put companies in front of executives that they wouldn't have been exposed to from a different sector, a different part of the world, that do something interesting that they can be challenged and inspired by.
Well, having said that, is there a company that you think about for the Bloomberg audience that they should be looking at, or a leader that they should be looking at that maybe isn't one that Tim and I talk about a lot?
There's so many companies doing really, really interesting things, but I'll tell you one that I use in many of my programs. It's a company called Zipline. I don't know if you follow them, the drone company. Drone delivery
stuff in Rwanda.
Look, exactly. I find them fascinating because, I work at the nexus of business and politics, right? And so regulation in the U.S. and Europe would have made a business like this impossible. So what do? They pivot. They go to Africa, they save lives, and before you know it, they put together a coalition of stakeholders that opened doors for them, and they've moved much faster because they were agile, they were purpose-focused. And so I use them as an example relatively regularly in my programs to get companies to think differently.
Yeah, it's a really interesting company. We featured them quite a bit here at Bloomberg. Willingness to pay.
Yeah.
A term you find in business school.
Yeah.
The willingness to pay for an executive looking for an education is very high. For example, at Columbia, the executive MBA, how much do you think it costs?
Per student, I don't know, is it like $40,000?
$240,000 for 2 years.
Okay.
That's the executive MBA.
That's 4 years. 4 years?
2 years.
2 years.
That's 2 years.
Yeah.
That's the executive MBA, so that's the part-time.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years is,
commitment.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or whatever.
Yeah.
Tuition for, that was last year. I can't find this year.
Yeah.
So it's expected to go between 2 and 7% per year. For the full-time MBA, it's like $90,000 a year. You got to throw on some more fees. And
for 3 years. Yeah, you got to pay it twice.
Yeah, you got to pay it twice. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
How much do you make from the executives who come versus those in the 20% who are doing like the full-time MBA versus the executive MBA.
Yeah.
Because the willingness to pay for those execs, that's higher. And companies often pay for it.
They do. And again, you got to demonstrate that impact. So we're a nonprofit foundation, right? So our goal is to have impact on the world, right? No, of course they are. You know, I mean, it's hard to believe with some of the prices, right? But what we do is
nothing, right?
Well, look, I mean, what we do is expensive, right? To have terrific faculty, bring them together, support them so they can continue to do research and thought leadership at the cutting edge, right? It's not cheap, and we put a fair amount of effort on raising funds for scholarships and running programs or doing initiatives that make programs accessible. But you're quite right. There are lots of options. So you were asking me before about competition. There are the top business schools, of course, that we compete with, but there are a lot of other providers. There's a lot of great content available. And so you really have to work hard on how do you design things that are impactful, how do you have pedagogy that lets people learn. As people get older, it gets harder to learn, so you got to think harder about how do I put them in situations where they can learn. And so we're making ourselves accountable for the ROI that we're generating. And when we can demonstrate the impact of learning, then the willingness to pay is clearly there. I think that's true both for degree and non-degree education.
All right, so just because you are Bloomberg, so for a week, what does it cost for a student?
Yeah, so we run week-long open programs. They tend to cost about $10,000 to $12,000 per week.
For an individual?
For an individual, right? Now again, we call it a week, but it may have started 2 weeks before with some exercises and activities and assessments and continues beyond that. We have some programs that are, 3 days, 5,000, 6,000. And then, of course, we have more affordable options. We run what we call sprints, 2 weeks, an hour a day, usually online. And, those are about $900. So it's still an important investment, but we do try to meet people at different price points.
Very cool stuff. No, a lot of specifics, which makes it super interesting to hear about. David, thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Look forward to future conversations. David Bach, he's president-elect of IMD, soon to be president come September. As he said, it's a global executive education platform, joining us right here in our studio. David, thank you so much again.
Thanks.
Well, shares of Tesla right now are down in the after hours.
3.5%.
3.5%, yeah. So the pressure is on. This after it fell short of Wall Street profit estimates in the second quarter, extending a rocky start to the year marked by slower sales and mass firings across the company.
All right, so let's get to it, because this is one of the other big companies reporting here after the close in what was a busy earnings aftermarket day. Bloomberg Intelligence Global Autos analyst Steve Mann joining us from BI headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey. All right, Steve, come on in on this. So Tesla shares down about 3.4% as we speak. Why is it that there's some disappointment here?
Well, if you look at their earnings, they did take a restructuring charge of about $622 million. If you exclude that, they did